Hey guys, Hike and Hinkle here. We have a different kind of video for you today. So rather than my traditional videos where I showcase the trail and put some background music to it, instead this is going to be a full in-depth review of the extended presidential traverse hike that I did. Now I'll leave a link up in one of these corners here to the traditional trail video if you want to check that out. But today we're going to talk in depth about that trail and go through the pros and the cons of doing the extended presidential traverse. So before we get too far into this video, let's talk about what is the extended presidential traverse. So the presidential traverse hike is a hike in New Hampshire's White Mountain National Forest, and it's a pretty daunting one. You cover 9 peaks in the extended version, and you do just about 9,500 feet of elevation change, and it's just about 26 miles. So it's a pretty intense hike. Most people do it as an overnight. There are a select few who do it as a day hike. The 9 mountains that you hike are Madison, Adams, Jefferson, Washington, Monroe, Franklin, Eisenhower, Pierce, and Jackson. Now all 9 of those mountains are on the 4,000 foot list if you're trying to peak bag all of New Hampshire's high peaks. So a little bit about the background I did before going into this hike. Now for such a daunting challenge such as this, where you're going to be hiking for over 26 miles and have over 9,000 feet of elevation change and try to tackle so many peaks in a single day, most people do a lot of training leading up to it. They do a lot of trail running, training, work on, honing their gear to be as light as possible, and just try to get their legs ready to really crush the miles throughout the day. I did none of that. So leading up to this hike, I just did, my casual hikes. I was hiking probably like every other week, ranging from about 5 to 10-ish miles. And you guys saw most of those hikes here on the channel. So I didn't do any specific trail running training leading up to this. So that may influence some of my pro and cons lists that we're gonna get into. So my first pro is getting to do the sunrise hike. Now I know this isn't specific to this particular hike in upstate New Hampshire, but it was my first time ever doing a sunrise hike myself. And I gotta say, it's a really cool experience where you start in the dark and you really can't see much of anything as you're going along. And then as you're climbing up that elevation, you just start to see the sun peek its way out from behind Mount Madison. And then you hit Mount Madison for the sunrise. And that was a beautiful experience, just being able to see the sunrise over the White Mountain National Forest range. And there's pretty much nothing else you can see from the top of Madison besides more mountains. And being able to see that at sunrise is a very special experience that I'm probably gonna remember for the rest of my life. Now, my second pro here is on the presidential thru hike. It is very exposed. So you're above tree line for pretty much the entire thing. Once you get to the summit of Mount Madison, you don't go back into the trees until towards the end when you get past Mount Pierce. So that being said, one of the major pros is being able to clearly see your progress as you're going along. It's a cool feeling of summiting each mountain, and then you're able to see that next mountain right in front of you. And you're like, I'm on this one, I'm going to that one. And then once you get there, you look back and you're like, I just came from that mountain, now I'm on this mountain, and there's my next one. So it's a really cool feeling of being able to actually see your progress throughout the day and know how much you accomplished. My next pro is probably a pretty obvious one, and it's one that you get no matter which hike you really pick to choose in New Hampshire's White Mountain National Forest. It's that there's fantastic views along the entire trail. So since you're climbing on a ridgeline trail, and you are above the tree lines the entire time, besides being able to see that clear progress I was talking about, the views are just fantastic. Like, you can see for miles, and the only thing you see when you're up there is more mountains. So it's probably some of the most awe-inspiring views I've ever seen in my life. And my final pro is that sense of accomplishment. Now, obviously, you know, if you do a hike such as this, where you're going over 26 miles, you're doing over 9,000 feet of elevation change, you're tackling 9 4,000-foot mountains in a single day, you're gonna feel an overwhelming sense of accomplishment that you did that. And when you finally make it to the end and you're able to look back on it, you feel proud of it. You're like, dang, I pushed my body to do that. And you remember the fact that you did that even through the next couple days when you're not really able to walk. Now on to the cons. Now, my first con here is directly related to the fact that I didn't do any trail running experience leading up to this hike. And that is that, you know, when you're on the trail going along, most people have done a lot of training leading up to this. It makes sense when you're trying to do such an extreme challenge. However, since I didn't, I was being passed by people all day. And that just leads you to this feeling of not feeling very fit. And it makes you just kind of feel bad about your overall fitness level. Even though you're doing something that's, you know, just such a hard challenge to do. And it's a great accomplishment. And it's not about how fast you finish it, but the fact that you do finish it. In the moment, when you're doing it, when you're getting passed by pretty much everyone on the trail, it just makes you feel unfit. And it kind of brings your spirits down. My second con is one that I actually wasn't expecting too much on this trail. And that's that it was very crowded. There were actually a lot of people besides us doing the extended presidential thru hike that day. And we did it on a Saturday with beautiful weather, which may explain the crowd that it attracted. But it was still kind of surprising to see how many people there really were on the trail trying to do the same challenge as us. So my next con here is that this hike is very exposed. So you get above the tree line when you're on your way to your first summit, Mount Madison. And you don't go back below the tree line till after your 8th peak, Mount Pierce. And that means you are completely exposed to the elements up there. So there's a lot of wind up on the ridgeline. There's a lot of sun, but it also means there's nowhere to actually go to the bathroom if you have to relieve yourself. And that's a major issue if you have a small bladder like I do. Now, in most years, this isn't too much of a concern because there are plenty of Amc Huts located throughout the trail. There's the Madison Springs Hut between Mount Madison and Mount Adams. There's the Washington Visitor Center on the top of Mount Washington. There's Lake of the Clouds Hut right after Mount Washington. And then there's also the Matza Springs Hut on your way up the final ascent to Mount Jackson. During Corona times though, or if you attempt this hike during the off season, most of these are closed. It makes it harder to do the hike, and that was one thing I didn't even consider going in. So my next con has to do with the time of day you have to start this hike in order to complete it as a day hike. And that is that the rocks are very slippery. So your first few mountains that you're going up, Mount Madison, Mount Adams, and Mount Jefferson, are all very rock scrambly mountains. And in the morning, with the dew on those rocks, they become extremely slippery. And this makes it so that way, not only are your ascents and descents off these mountains very slow, because you have to be careful, it also means that you are much more likely to slip off the rocks. So my next con here is that there's really no time for views throughout the day. And what I mean by that is when you're doing the extended presidential traverse, because it's so many miles and so much elevation. It really does take all day to complete, and then some. You saw we had to start all the way at 3:30 in the morning, and we didn't finish until past 10 p.m. at night. We were on the trail for over 18 hours, and some of that is due because I was injured near the end, but it's just a lot of trail and a lot of miles to cover in one day. So it makes this feeling when you're doing it that you always have to rush and keep going, and you can't really stop to enjoy any of the mountain peaks, which is kind of a major con in my eyes. Because when I hike, I love the experience of looking at stuff as you're going up the mountain, and then getting to the top and relaxing for a bit, enjoying the view. But on this hike, you couldn't do any of that. You had more miles to cover. So every time you got to the top of a mountain, you kind of just got up there, you looked at it, you said, this one's checked off the list, now let's keep trugging on to the next one. And that's kind of the mentality for the entire day. So you never really get that chance to just kind of stop and appreciate the views and appreciate the mountain, because you're too worried about getting to your next peak. So my next con is the summit of Mount Washington itself was extremely crowded. There were a ton of people up there. And the reason for that is there's so many different ways to get to the top of Washington. You can hike up it like we did. You can take the Cog Rail Trail up there, or you can even drive your car on up. And it's great that there's such easy access to one of the tallest peaks in the Northeast region, but it creates just an environment where there's a ton of people around. So if you like going hiking for that feeling of solitude and being kind of alone in nature, this isn't that at all. And it made it so that way we didn't actually want to spend really any time at the top of Washington. We didn't even get a picture with the summit sign, because the line to get a picture with the summit sign when we were there was like an hour-long wait. So we just kind of got to the top and then continued on. Overall, at the end of the day, all the pros and cons considered, I'm really glad I did it. It is something that I really strived for and wanted to accomplish ever since I learned that the presidential thru hike was a thing. So I'm glad that I was finally able to accomplish this hike and say that I've done it and finish it. So if you guys are considering doing your own extended presidential traverse hike, feel free to leave comments of any questions you have down below, and I'll try to help you out and answer them. I would say there's a couple main takeaways if you're trying to plan it yourself. First, know your route. Know exactly where you want to go throughout the day. Second, start early, give yourself a lot of time. And third, be prepared for the hurt. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's a different type of video than I normally do. Leave a like if you did enjoy it, and comment down below if you want me to do a type of review like this for any of the other hikes that I have on the channel. Subscribe for future videos, and I'll see you all next time. Bye. There's an airplane flying above. We're gonna wait for that to pass. It's a very slow moving airplane. We'll be here waiting for a while.